as President Trump has officially announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran. The ceasefire was mediated by Pakistan, and it was subject to the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran says it's going to do. It's going to open the strait. Let's bring in retired Marine Intelligence Officer, national security analyst, and the host of the Strap podcast, Hal Kempfer. Hal, we've been asking the audience to send questions in, and Aaron is asking about something that I'm also curious about. What is Iran's plan during this 2-week ceasefire? How much time is 2 weeks, and what kind of things can Iran do within that type of time span?
Well, Austin, first off, 2 weeks is not a lot of time, all right? However, the thing I'm going to be looking for tomorrow is I want to see if they're going to open the Strait of Hormuz. That's a requirement. That's a hard and fast. That is a condition of the ceasefire, is that they open the Strait of Hormuz. If the Strait of Hormuz isn't open, then why are we having a ceasefire? So that's the first thing, and Iran has to perform on that. You know, one of the questions is, has Iran done something like mine parts of the main sea lanes that go through the Strait of Hormuz, and do they know where those mines are? Are they able to get those mines, demine that area? I don't think they can. I'm not even sure if they know where they put all their mines. And so the big thing here is really insurance is going to drive a lot of this, maritime insurance. There has to be a degree of risk assessment that will allow the rates to drop to the point that the ships can go actually through in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. So there is a lot to happen, and it's got to happen very fast. Now, if they get it out, not so much what Iran's going to get, but certainly for what the world's going to get, obviously a lot of oil, but also natural gas, which has become an increasingly important commodity, but also fertilizer. We're facing a food sufficiency crisis next year if we can't get the fertilizer out of there for agriculture worldwide to support it. So that is an absolutely crucial thing. It's planting season right now, and they got to get the fertilizer out there in order to get that going. So that's going to be a big one. Now, what will Iran do? Iran's going to have to negotiate in good faith. They're going to probably have to do something big that they don't want to do with that enriched uranium, which is to allow international inspectors there, to allow the enriched uranium to be relocated to another country. There's just a lot that has to happen with that, and I don't see that dropping. Now, that 2 weeks is time to negotiate another 2 weeks or another week or whatever. And once things are flowing in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, if discussions are going in the right direction, you might see this lengthen out to be a longer ceasefire. But we have to see what's going to happen. We have to see, first off, are they going to comply with that initial part? Now, I will say tonight, you probably heard the phrase, the calm before the storm. Well, in Middle East ceasefires, you'll often see the storm before the calm, which is everybody fires everything off right before the ceasefire takes effect. And one of the things we're watching is that somebody in Iran was firing off ballistic missiles after the ceasefire took effect. They stopped shortly afterwards, but missiles were dropping around Israel and elsewhere around the Middle East. And the question was, who authorized that? And do they really, as whoever we're talking to, do they really have control over their security apparatus?
Yeah, I was reading in Axios that U.S. officials told Axios that they anticipate the lower level IRGC levels. They get these messages on sort of a delay, is the way it was written about. And that was actually going to be one of my questions for you. They say that if a message like that gets delayed to the lower ranking members of the RGC, it makes sense that you could see some fired missiles after the ceasefire takes place. But if we could look into that, why does it take time for lower ranking members of the IRGC to get, important news like, hey, stop shooting?
Part of it is we've degraded their command, control, and communications network through this war. We've done a lot of things that are less apparent to those looking from the outside, but we've significantly degraded their ability to communicate effectively with all their disparate parts. If you recall, when this thing kicked off, it was a decapitation strike that took out the supreme leader and about 49 other really top leaders. And you saw this kind of lag effect. There was a kind of a slow response, slow retaliation. You knew Iran was going to retaliate, but it was really kind of a slow retaliation before it finally kicked off. And that was because of this very, very, very tight command and control thing they had, where it went to only top decision makers. It's a autocratic system. It doesn't reward initiative at the lower levels. And because of that, they wait for higher headquarters to give them an order. So if their last order was to fire, they will keep firing regardless of what they think the situation might be, until someone tells them specifically not to fire. And if that comms path, that communications path, is degraded, so there's a delay in getting that, then you will see missiles get launched. The concern is that somebody there could have actually been saying, hey, keep firing just for a little bit. Let's kind of push the envelope here and launch a few more missiles in at the very end, in the idea that maybe it'll provoke a response, which they will then claim that the other side violated the ceasefire. So I think we're going to find out more about this and find out what the specifics are, but it is something we have to watch.
Yeah, it's worth also underscoring that it appears, at least from the initial reports, that this does not only affect the U.S. and Iran. This will also bring a ceasefire in the Israeli direction as well, and in Lebanon. Obviously, Hezbollah and the IDF have been at war with each other as well. We're looking at video from the IDF that they've been posting in recent days of some of the attacks they've been carrying out in Iran and Lebanon. Hal, Paul sends this question in. Is the U.S. not afraid that Iran is just using this time to mobilize their units for a more strategic attack?
That's something that we'll be watching very closely. And from an intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance perspective, what we call ISR, everything's going to be turned on during this period. We're going to be watching everything they do to see if they're using this period to, to dig out these collapsed entrance tunnels to these underground missile cities. We'll be watching that very closely. We'll be watching anything they do around their nuclear facilities. Certainly anything in and around the Strait of Hormuz, whether it's anti-ship missiles, small boats, midget submarines, whatever. We're going to be watching that very, very closely. Twofold. Number one, to figure out if they're trying to set it up to go back to war again, or do something, nefarious and surreptitious that could cause great harm. The second thing is, we would like, if the ceasefire does collapse, we would like to be able to effectively target all of those assets in order to have the maximum effect in the shortest amount of time. So we'll be watching them very, very closely. But it's a real question is what's going to happen. My sense is that behind the scenes, the rumblings of that 80 to 90% of the Iranian population that's had it with the regime is fomenting. And I have a feeling that something's going to pop up there. I don't think, despite the draconian actions that the regime took, killing tens of thousands of Iranian protesters in January and December, that feeling with the body politic around Iran is not going away. And I have a feeling that that is going to surface here at some point. I'm just wondering how soon that'll happen.
Christian Daytok is a White House reporter for the Washington Examiner. He says the White House has declined to outline the 10-point plan submitted by Iran. A statement by Caroline Leavitt says President Trump's words speak for themselves. This is a workable basis to negotiate, and those negotiations will continue. The truth is that President Trump and our powerful military got Iran to agree to reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and negotiations will continue. We'll wait to hear more from Secretary Hegseth and from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff tomorrow at a press conference as well. By the way, Reuters with this, saying Iranian state TV is claiming Trump had accepted Iran's terms for ending the war, describing it as a, quote, humiliating retreat by the U.S. president. Hal, your reaction to how the U.S. and Iran are characterizing this ceasefire?
I will say this. President Trump does not take kindly to people who say things about him. Other presidents would have probably just kind of said, okay, I'm not going to worry about what they say. But President Trump, when words are said like that, he does tend to react. And I think that was a strategic error, certainly in their strategic communications, to use language like that. Describing this as a humiliating defeat for President Trump is a mistake. And I think it's a mistake that could turn into some kinetic action later on, or other types of action. They have seen what we can do with this, rescuing our weapons systems officer that was downed, and how we can bring a lot of things to bear, and how we can get a lot of resources deep within Iran. So I kind of wonder what their thinking is. I'm believing that is some retrenched Revolutionary Guard Corps that can't clean up their own rhetoric for the greater good, and they're putting stuff like that out. But I think that's a real mistake for them to say stuff like that.
I think a big question a lot of people have here is what has to be done to prevent us from being back in the same position in 2 weeks? Hormuz, of course, is a major piece of it, but what other major pieces of it are you looking at?
I'm looking at a lot of pieces, and I think the first thing is the strait has to be completely open, and we've got to see movement going through there. All right. Once movement's going through there, I think we're going to be looking very closely at what Iran has as far as assets in the area and how we can effectively target them should this thing not get extended. All right. The second thing is, even though the overt military operations against Iran will be in a cessation, I'm not thinking that the U.S. nor Israel are going to stop the covert operations behind the scenes. So there'll be a lot of things going on there as well during this 2-week period. Hopefully, Iran won't break the ceasefire. Hopefully, we won't see drone attacks and ballistic missile attacks. One of the big questions is, what are the Houthis going to do down in Yemen? They've been making noise like they're going to block up the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and stop that vital waterway. 12% of the world's commerce goes through that Bab el-Mandeb Strait that leads up to the Suez Canal. And so there's a lot of concern that this strait opens, this other strait closes, and we're kind of back to where we were before, with one vital waterway kind of semi-open or semi-secure, and the other one being kind of semi-closed by this Iranian proxy group. So there's a lot of things we have to watch for, because I think the situation is still much more dynamic. I wouldn't, as we like to say in the Marine Corps, I wouldn't drop my pack anytime soon.
So let's go to Todd's question. Todd is asking, what constitutes a violation of this 2-week ceasefire, and what is the appropriate response to that violation?
That is an excellent question. And I'll give a very lawyerly response, and I'm not a lawyer, but I would say it depends. It really depends on what that violation would be, and whether we think that violation is a complete abrogation of the agreement that's in place, and that we call a halt to the ceasefire and we go right back into the full kinetic effect, or whether it's a one-off or a mistake or something along those lines. One of the areas that gets into that really gray zone is terrorist attacks or attacks by the Iranian proxies. How are we going to judge those? How will we evaluate those? Today we had a series of bombs go off in Baghdad, right around the U.S. Embassy. Is that an Iranian attack? Is that something that's domestic up there? It's almost assuredly tied to the Popular Mobilization Front militias that are tied directly to Iran. So the question is, how are we going to treat that? What happens if they, try to blow up an embassy, or what if they kill a lot of Americans in a third country? What if there's a lot of scenarios out there, and it really just depends on how we interpret that. And was that a deliberate action by Iran to fight the war by other means? And if so, should we just drop all pretense and then call a halt to the ceasefire and continue our kinetic action? A lot of discussion on that.
There was a lot of discussion this morning about what Trump posted earlier today, saying that a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. The president sent that out on Truth Social earlier today. Hal, of course, now as things stand tonight, couldn't be any different. We're in a ceasefire that's been brokered now, but I got to ask you about the words he used. He said a whole civilization will die tonight. What's the use case for those types of words? Is it, brinkmanship? Would that be the word for something like that?
I will say this, that and the text that he wrote this weekend where he dropped the F-bomb in a text, I was a little taken aback by that. And I heard a number of anchors out there trying to report that and going, do I say this word on the air or not? That was rather surprising. But what I will say is this. One of the things that if you spend time in the Middle East, and this is going to sound strange, if you remember the character Corporal Klinger in MASH, he would always have these very flowery curses he would say. There is a certain bit of truth to that. In the Middle East, some of the rhetoric, some of the language that's used is certainly a lot more, shall we say, colorful, and in many cases, things that we would shake our heads and go, oh my gosh, what are you saying? And, you know, like the mother of all battles, when we'd hear that, Saddam Hussein would say things like that, or we'd hear things from Middle Eastern terrorist groups talking about, you know, the world in apocalyptic terms. And to our Western ears, that's it's really something that we shake our heads and go, how do you do this? Well, what's interesting, and I don't know if he did this deliberately, but by saying that, which certainly for all the Western capitals, European capitals, the United Nations, everywhere, they're like, you can't do that. Certainly lawyers are weighing in saying if you use language like that and then follow up with strikes, you could be accused of war crimes because of what it says. But if your audience is sitting in Tehran and you use language like that, if your audience is a Revolutionary Guard Corps leadership, they see the world a little bit different. They see, you know, we always talk about, you know, speak softly, carry a big stick. In the Middle East, it's the exact opposite. You speak very loudly and very dramatically, and what you do tends to be somewhere back here, but not as strong as your language up front. What President Trump has done is he's put the language way out here, which is it's not a Western approach, certainly not a Western diplomatic approach in terms of communicating, but it seems to have resonated. As strange as it is, here we are at a ceasefire, 11th hour deal. And as much as we would sit there and say that, you know, that you can't, that's just unacceptable language or whatever in international discourse, in Tehran, I think it actually had an effect in the thinking and the processing within the Revolutionary Guard Corps leadership, saying, you got a U.S. president saying this, wow. And I'm sure some are saying, that's the type of language we would use, not the stuff that the U.S. uses. That's really something. So I actually think it may have been a bit for effect, and the effect seems to have worked.
You know, in recent weeks, there's been reports about how Iran's Gulf neighbors have been reacting to all of this. Of course, the Strait of Hormuz has been a big point of focus throughout this conflict, but you see some of the Gulf states there, like the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, the Saudis, Kuwait. How do they feel about this war coming to a ceasefire? I believe I saw some discussion out there, and this might have been reported, you know, indirectly, not a direct quote from any of these countries, but I remember reading some reporting saying that some of these countries might not have minded if the war had continued on, because they wouldn't have minded seeing more destruction of the Iranian regime. So if you're the Saudis or if you're the UAE tonight, how does news of this ceasefire get processed?
Both of those countries had expressed that they would like to see this thing finished, if you will. They want to see us, you know, they don't want to see a quick ceasefire and get stuck. Now, the question is this a quick ceasefire? I kind of look at what was going on over there. You know, we have 2 Marine Expeditionary Units out there. If you look at those little islands in the Strait, we definitely had the means to seize those islands and hold those islands and take physical control of the Strait of Hormuz. Not saying there wouldn't be any anti-ship threats from a variety of means, but I would say that we would have predominant control. And 3 of those islands are actually islands that are claimed as sovereign territory by the UAE, so they would probably recover those in quick order as well. And then you go up north to Kark. Well, we hit Kark Island last night. That's where 90% of the oil comes out of. We hit 50 targets there. I don't know how much they had left from the previous hit where we hit military targets up in Kark Island. But I have to believe that Kark Island was kind of wide open to an invasion, which I presume would probably be 82nd Airborne elements going in there and seizing the island and holding the island. At that point, Iran has very little ability to export oil because we control their main hub for oil. They do have a little port on the Gulf of Oman, but frankly, it would be one strike mission and that port would be shut down, so they would have no ability to export any oil, which would cut off all revenue to the regime. And even though they, IRGC, besieged militia, or revolutionary zealots, if you quit paying them, at some point they're going to be disgruntled revolutionary zealots, and they're going to stop doing what they're ordered to do because they don't have any income and they have to feed their families. So, I think there was just a lot that goes on there. But I think that Saudi Arabia, I think part of what forced this was that rhetoric from Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which was convincing the regime in Tehran that if the U.S. seizes these islands, there is a occupation force that is local that could hold these islands. And that, I think, scared them, because at that point they wonder, will we ever get these islands back?
So just to kind of put a fine point on some of this, because a lot of the day, there were people in Iran that were preparing for the U.S. to carry out some sort of massive operation. These are videos of bridges in the area. My understanding was that there were human, there we go.
There they are.
A human chain that they made out there at some of these energy facilities, which President Trump had said he would target energy facilities if the Iranians did not come to an agreement with the White House. Hal, we're getting this in from the AP. They say the Israeli military says that the country is still attacking Iran after the White House said Israel agreed to a ceasefire. Is there any reason to look more into this other than what you and I were just talking about, which is that in the Middle East, it's not uncommon for us to see people shoot one last shot before the ceasefire starts?
I had seen something like that, too, that said there were still some strike missions happening by Israel. I get the sense that Iran was launching some stuff and Israel had some stuff in play, and they were kind of wrapping a few things up, if you will. We'll see if things calm down. My understanding right now is if you're standing in Tel Aviv, or if you're standing in Doha, or you're standing in Dubai, that things have quieted down. That they basically aren't seeing any signs of ballistic missiles or anything else. Although earlier, right after the ceasefire was announced, they were seeing that. I think both sides are going to take a little bit to cool off here and to kind of get into the ceasefire norm. At least I hope so. The big question I have, though, is what's going to happen in Lebanon with Hezbollah. That's a little bit ambiguous to me as to what that situation is, because that's not directly tied to the Strait of Hormuz or Iran. It's more indirect. And I'm just wondering, certainly with how Hezbollah tends to violate ceasefires at the drop of a hat, I could see that particular sector heat up real quick while everything else is maybe calming down.
Yeah. If it takes time for message of a ceasefire to reach the lower levels of the IRGC ranks, I'm curious how long it takes to get to members of Hezbollah who might be firing at northern Israel. Live look at Beirut, by the way, the time in Lebanon and in Israel just past 4:30 in the morning. Hal, it's time for us to wrap it up here in a bit. What are the main things you're watching out for? We got 2 weeks of ceasefire ahead of us. What are you watching for in the next couple of days?
Next couple of days. Will the strait open?
Right.
If the strait doesn't open, then what is this for? If we can't get fuel and liquefied natural gas and products and fertilizer and everything coming out of the strait and everything going back in, what is this for? And if that doesn't happen, I can see the ceasefire ending very quickly. All right. The other thing I'm going to watch is any intelligence, any information that comes out about what the Iranians are doing to fortify defenses, to dig out from places that were bombed, to put their weaponry back in order. In other words, are they doing those things necessary that they would see as necessary to kicking off another offensive action? That's something I'm going to watch for as well. I'll certainly be looking for Israeli compliance with the ceasefire too. But those are all things I'm going to be looking for right away. And then longer term, I'm going to be looking at the negotiations themselves. They're going to go in Islamabad. The Pakistanis are brokering this whole thing. And I want to see if some real progress is going to get made. And specifically, I'm looking at nuclear. Will that enrich uranium? Will there be an agreement on that? Can we get that out? Can we finally achieve what we've been trying to achieve for so long? That's going to be a big question. And if they can get something on the nuclear enrichment side of this, I think it opens up a host of other opportunities that this thing could scale down in the coming months.
Hal Kempfer is a retired Marine intelligence officer and the host of the Strat podcast. You can listen to Strat anywhere podcasts are available. Thanks, Hal.
All right. Thanks, Austin.
You bet.